This is the iFlight Nazgul Eco. It is a $200 5-inch quadcopter, and I'm working on reviewing it. But this isn't a review of this quadcopter. No, this is a setup guide. So, because I have to set it up before I review it. So if you have bought this quadcopter and you're looking to get it set up, hopefully this video is going to be exactly what you need. I'm Joshua Bardwell. You're going to learn something today. And in order to set up this quadcopter, we're going to need to use Betaflight. Betaflight is the firmware that's running on the flight controller, and Betaflight Configurator, which you see here on my desktop, is the software that we're going to use to interface with it and configure it. If you haven't downloaded and installed Betaflight, this isn't going to be like a total from 0 video. It's going to be like from 3. Okay, so if you are at a 0, then you need to get the absolute basics like installing Betaflight Configurator, getting your driver set up and so forth. Then I'm going to link you to a different video. It's in the video description below, and it's for people starting from 0. But we're going to assume at this point that you have Betaflight Configurator installed. Now, there is a caveat here. This quadcopter has made some concessions in order to save money and get that $200 price point all the way down. And one of the concessions it has made is that the flight controller has an AT32 chip on it instead of the usual STM32 chip. And the reason that matters is that you might not have drivers for the AT32 chip. So the first thing you're going to do is plug in USB to the flight controller. And in Betaflight Configurator, you should hope that you will see COM and some number, mine is COM18, the number doesn't matter, AT32 virtual COM port. If you plug in USB and you don't see that, there's a chance that you don't have the correct drivers. Where can you get those drivers? You can get that driver from this webpage, which is linked in the video description below, and you're going to scroll all the way down almost to the entire bottom of the page to the USB tool and driver section, and you're going to download this virtual serial COM port composite PC driver. That's the first thing you need. That'll let you connect to the flight controller, but you may not be able to flash it. In order to flash it, you're going to download this, the ISP Programmer in-system program tool supporting AT32 MCU. We'll download that, and don't install that whole tool. We only need one piece of that, the bootloader DFU driver. And you're going to go into Artery DFU driver install, and you're going to run DFU driver install.exe. Once you've done those two things, you will have the correct drivers for the AT32 flight controllers, and you should not have to do this again until you get a new computer or reinstall your operating system. This is not an everyday thing. This is a one-time thing. And I want to get a disclaimer out of the way here. You may be tempted to update the firmware on this. Well, first of all, you don't have to, because this is already on Betaflight 4.5.0, which is the latest firmware Betaflight has released at the time I'm making this video, and probably will be for the foreseeable future. But even if Betaflight 4.6.0 is released, don't just flash your flight controller to the new version. You'll wipe out the whole configuration of the flight controller, and you'll have to set it up from scratch. And unless you already know how to do that, you just fly it as it was delivered. However, we're going to look through this configuration and see if there are any little tweaks that we might want to make, that I might want to make. For example, here in the configuration tab, I'm going to put my pilot name in. It's JB. Some people put their pilot name in as the craft name. That's a personal decision. Betaflight didn't used to have a pilot name. So if you wanted to put your call sign in the OSD, you would put your pilot name in as the craft name. Now they do. I love that they're shipping this with the maximum arm angle set to 180 degrees. That allows the quadcopter to arm if it isn't perfectly flat and level. That's something I do on all my quadcopters, and it's nice that they've decided to ship it that way. It's interesting that they've shipped this with the D-Shot beacon turned on. The D-Shot beacon is used on quadcopters that don't have a beeper. What that does is it uses the motors as a beeper. If you crash and you lose the quadcopter in the grass, you can't find it. You may be surprised to hear me say uses the motors as a beeper. You know when you plug in the battery and it goes doo-doo-doo, doo-doo, or whatever it does? What's beeping there? It's the motors. The ESC has such precise control over the motors that it can literally vibrate them and make them act as a loudspeaker. So if you've got a quadcopter that doesn't have a beeper, you can use your motors as a beeper instead. But I can't help but notice that this quadcopter does have a beeper. So I wonder what they're doing here. Let's just double check that. We'll plug in a battery. Does it have a beeper? I didn't hear any beeping there. It sure looks like a beeper. Why wasn't it beeping? I turn this off. There we go. Betaflight must be smart enough not to use the built-in beeper when you're using the motor beeper. actually don't think that's even true because I've had quadcopters where both the motors and the beeper were beeping at the same time, and that was pretty annoying. Personally, I'd rather use the built-in beeper. It's louder than the motor beeper, and it just lets the motors be motors instead of making them do double duty. I'm not sure why iFlight has shipped this way. A little confusing. Anyway, I'm going to make that change. We'll see if it's a good or a bad idea. In the failsafe tab, the failsafe behavior is set as drop. And what that means is that if I lose my control link, for example, because I flew too far away or I flew behind an obstacle, then the quadcopter will simply disarm and fall out of the sky. Now, my quadcopter does have a GPS on it, and eventually I will set this quadcopter up to do GPS rescue or return to home when I fail safe. But resist the urge, if you have a GPS, resist the urge to just click GPS rescue as your fail safe behavior. GPS rescue on Betaflight requires you to set it up carefully. And if you just enable it and go off the defaults, there's a very good chance that it's not going to work right. And it's going to fly to the moon or fly away or crash or something. So we're going to leave this on drop for now. And if you want to set up GPS rescue, then you can use my Betaflight 4.5 GPS rescue setup guide, which you see right here. I'll link that down in the video description below. It's pretty involved. It's like 36 minutes long, but it takes you through all the steps of making sure GPS rescue is actually going to work correctly, and you're not going to be one of those guys going, Betaflight GPS rescue doesn't work. I tried failsafe and my quad crashed, and I don't know why. If we go to the OSD tab, setting up the on-screen display is something that just about every pilot's going to want to do. The default OSD that they've got here is fine. I don't have any real complaints about it, but I would really like to set up my personal OSD that I have on all my quads. And I'm happy to say that it's here in the presets tab. So first of all, if I go to preset sources, you can see I've added my custom GitHub repo. You can see the specs for it here. And what that means is that if I just search OSD presets, interesting, they've copied my OSD presets into the Betaflight repo. That's cute. This is an NTSC or PAL camera. Hold on, let me look. So it looks like it is a PAL camera. Okay, we'll make a note that iFlight have designated this a PAL camera. We're going to assume that's correct. Otherwise, their OSD isn't going to work right with their camera. Presumably, they got that right, though. And if we go to presets and choose OSD presets, and here are JB OSD presets, and I'm going to choose my analog PAL. And then this is not a digital VTX, so that doesn't matter. We're going to hit pick and agree. And save and reboot. The OSD has craft name in it instead of pilot name. That's okay. We'll just change the craft. There we go. JB, low voltage, all that stuff. This quad does have GPS on it. My preset doesn't have GPS in it. So let's add some GPS stuff. We definitely want GPS sats. We want to know how many satellites we've got. We definitely want home direction, so we know what direction home is, and we can use that home direction arrow to verify that the GPS is working correctly. Well, I'd like to know the home distance. That's just nice to know. Speed? Sure. I'd like to know how fast I'm going. That's, why wouldn't you want to know how fast you're going? I definitely don't like to have my numerical altitude in my OSD so that I'm broadcasting to anyone who's watching exactly how many meters above ground I am. I like to eyeball the altitude. We're going to leave altitude. So there's a parameter called the HDOP, Horizontal Declination of Precision, I think is what it stands for. And basically it tells you how precise of a GPS fix you have. Just because you have some number of satellites locked doesn't necessarily mean it's a good fix. So in order to evaluate how good of a GPS fix you've got, it's nice to know the number of sats, but also the HDOP. Betaflight has a CLI option called OSD GPS sats show HDOP. And if we type set OSD GPS sats show HDOP, I'll just auto-complete that by pressing tab, and we'll turn that on. Then the sat lock, the sat count will also show the HDOP. Rule of thumb is an HDOP less than 2.0 is very, very good. An HDOP above 2.0 is not as good. So I always turn that on all my GPS birds. And you're not going to see that reflected here, but you will see that reflected when we look at the actual OSD of the actual quadcopter. Here in the video transmitter tab, you can set the band, channel, and output power for the video transmitter. I'm going to set that to race band channel 8. The reason I default to race 8 is that race 8 is above the frequencies that are used by Wi-Fi. So if you use race 8, you're guaranteed that no Wi-Fi networks in the area will mess with your video signal. If you're flying with other people, obviously you have to frequency coordinate with them, but since I am often flying alone at my house, I can just choose race 8 and it's no big deal. As far as the output power goes, we want all the output power. We're going to put that on 1K6, but we're going to choose low power disarm. What low power disarm does is keep the video transmitter at like 25 milliwatts so it's not overheating until you arm, and then it goes up to 1.6 watts. And what I like to do is choose on until first arm. And what that's going to do is the first time I arm, the video transmitter is going to go to 1.6 watts and then it's going to stay there. And the reason I do that is if I like land or crash out in the middle of a field somewhere and disarm, if my video transmitter then drops to 25 milliwatts, maybe I'll lose video. So I want to keep it at high power once I arm and start flying. But if I just power it up here on the bench, it's going to stay at a low power. I also have to wonder if we need to unlock this video transmitter. A lot of times you do. The manufacturer will ship them locked and they won't go to full power unless you unlock them. I don't see any indication that we need to unlock the VTX. I guess a way we could be sure would be, yeah. And so here on the VTX, it looks like there are LEDs for band, power, and channel. And if I, by the way, per the manual on the quad, make absolutely sure you have installed your video transmitter antenna before you power up. Okay, there we go. We got power, band, and channel. And I noticed that power is blinking once. I'm going to guess that means 25 milliwatts, and band and channel. And what I'm going to do is I'm just going to disable low power disarm so that it goes to full power right here on the bench, and we should see the power LED. I'm guessing it'll be 1, 2, 3, 4 blinks. I could look in the manual if I really wanted to, but I'd rather just make a wild ass guess. Here we go. Yep, there we go. 1, 2, 3, 4. Okay, so it is going to full power, and I guess that means we don't need to unlock it or anything like that. We'll turn back on low power disarm, on until first arm, and unplug the battery. We don't need the battery. You're probably thinking, Bardwell, why did you need to double check that? If the video transmitter was locked, surely I wouldn't have been able to select the output power here, and that's not true. What we're looking at here is what the flight controller is going to request that the video transmitter do. But if the video transmitter is locked, or if there's some other reason it can't comply, then it will just not do it. And so what we need to do is we need to look at the LEDs on the video transmitter to confirm that the changes we're making here in the video transmitter tab are actually taking effect. Once you've verified that it's working, then you don't need to look anymore. But when you first get it, it's nice to double check. Next, we need to bind the receiver to our controller. And I want you to look in the back of your quadcopter, up on the underside of the top plate. You should see a blinking LED, just like I'm seeing here. That's your receiver status LED. And mine, and probably yours, is fast flashing, blinkety, blinkety, blink, and that indicates that it is in Wi-Fi mode. Now you can bind Express ELRS without using Wi-Fi mode, although you can also bind it using Wi-Fi mode, and there's times when one is more convenient and the other is more convenient. I'm going to log into the Wi-Fi interface here real quick because I'm curious what version of Express ELRS they've shipped this on. So I'm just going to go to my Wi-Fi network and choose the Express ELRS RX Wi-Fi network and connect. And then after I connect, I'm going to go to 10.0.0.1 in my web browser, and 330, close, very close. We're not on 340. I don't remember why, but in my review, I was talking about ExpressOS 3.3 versus 3.4 and about a reason why we might like to be on 3.4. Oh yeah, it's the bind button. ExpressOS 3.4 allows you to bind using the bind button on the receiver. Why? How else would you bind? Well, I'll show you. What I'm going to do is unplug the USB port. I'm actually going to unplug it from my computer because it's easier than kind of reaching up under here and unplugging from the flight controller. And I want you to watch what I do. I'm going to unplug and the receiver will power down. I'm going to plug in, and as soon as I see the receiver LED blink one time, I'm going to unplug again. Ready? Just like that. I'm going to do it again, and I'm going to do it one more time. I'm going to plug in this time and leave it plugged in. And do you see that on the third time when I plug it in, instead of going blink, 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 the receiver is now going blink, 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 blink. It's a 2-blink pattern. That means it's in binding mode. Now I need to get my controller. Actually, I really need to get my controller because if it times out and goes back into Wi-Fi mode, I'll need to do the blink, blink thing again. Here in my controller, I'm going to long press the sys key. The controller that I'm using is the Radiomaster Boxer, and if you have a different controller, it probably also has a sys key, and you're going to long press it. I'll long press the sys key, which takes me to the Tools menu. Then I'm going to highlight Express LRS, and I'm going to click the jog wheel. And that'll bring up the Express LRS Lua script. I'm then going to scroll down to Bind and start binding. And nothing happened because, as you can see, it's been over a minute and my receiver has gone back into Wi-Fi mode. Probably I should have done the Lua script first and then the receiver second. Let me power down the receiver. 1, 2. Now we're in binding mode on the receiver. Here we go. We have 1 minute. Bind. Yes. Do you see we have a C in the upper right-hand corner of the screen? We are connected. Binding has been successful. Yay. Now, while you're here in the Lua script, there's a couple other changes I want you to make. I want you to scroll up. And first of all, I want you to change your packet rate. The way packet rate works with Express LRS is the lower the packet rate, the longer the range you're going to get. The higher the packet rate, the lower the latency you're going to get. So a racer who cared most about latency and not much at all about range might run 1,000 hertz packet rate. A longer range pilot who cared most about range and not at all about latency would take and turn this all the way down to its lowest value of 50 hertz. Both I and iFlight recommend 250 hertz as a good balance between range and latency, and the Nazgul Eco has been pre-configured. Its flight controller has been pre-configured for a 250 hertz packet rate, so that's what you should probably do. Also, make sure that your switch mode is set to wide, and I think this has become the default, but it's been a long time since I've just always been setting it to wide. If it's not wide, if it says hybrid, you should set that to wide. At this point, if we go to the receiver tab, we should see that when we move the sticks and on our controller, the channels here move as well. And you're going to want to verify that all of the sticks move the correct channel. So throttle down, throttle up, I see the throttle channel moving. Yaw left, yaw right, I see the yaw channel moving. Pitch forward, pitch back, I see the pitch channel moving, and roll left, roll right, I see the roll channel moving. Another way to do this is just to look at this quadcopter model right here, and as you turn, and you can sort of fly it with your controls, and you can just see that the controls are moving it the correct direction, except for throttle, which doesn't do anything to the 3D model at all. If those don't move the correct direction, then you need to adjust the channel mapping. And I've got a video about that. We're going to assume they move the correct direction. You can watch my video about channel mapping, linked in the video description below. In addition, you're going to want to check the endpoints, and your endpoints should be about 1,000 when you go all the way to the left or all the way down, to about 2,000 when you go all the way to the right or all the way up. If your channels are if they're like 988 to 2012, which is the default for a lot of settings, that's okay, you can leave that alone. But if they don't go to at least like, say 1010 or 1990, if they're not at least to the ends of the scale, then you're going to want to adjust your endpoints. And I have a video about that as well, which is linked in the video description below. Next, we're going to set up the aux modes for your quadcopter. And the aux modes are how the quadcopter knows that when I flip this switch on the controller, that means that you want me to, what do you want it to do? Well, this switch is the arm switch. This switch makes the beeper go beep beep, and there are many other things that the quadcopter can be told to do. We need to configure that here in the Modes tab. And iFlight ships the quadcopter with a very bare bones set of modes. There's an arm mode and an angle mode, and in fact, the arm mode is really the only one that works, because angle mode, the way that these aux modes work is this little marker here, this yellow marker, indicates the channel position or the switch position. Those are basically the same thing. And when this little yellow marker is inside this range, this yellow range, then the mode becomes active. And you can see that this yellow range for angle mode takes up the entire channel. So no matter what you do with that switch, angle mode is always going to be activated. And they do that because they don't want you to take off in acro mode and go fly and lose your quadcopter and crash your quadcopter. Many, many beginners are not prepared to fly in acro mode, so they ship it with angle mode permanently enabled. That's cool. That's cool. They're doing you a favor. But what you should do if you want to get good at flying in acro mode is use your controller. You can plug this thing into your computer and use it to fly in a simulator. And you should practice acro mode in the simulator, and after a few hours in the simulator, you'll start to get the hang of it, and then you could do it in real life. And you can always have angle mode there as a backup if you need it, but learn to fly acro mode in the simulator, not on a real drone. It's way less painful that way. I actually have a tutorial series teaching you how to fly in acro mode. I'll put a link to a whole playlist. It's up to like 20 videos right now, and it's a great way to learn to fly in acro mode. It's linked in the video description below. What I'm gonna do though is this. So I like to have angle mode on this switch, and we can see that this switch is already mapped to aux 2 on my quadcopter. What you can do is you can just hit auto right here and move that switch, and whatever aux channel that switch is mapped to on your radio will fill in right there. So at this point, you should have that little tick mark moving as you move the switch, and an aux channel should be filled in. Then I'm gonna put it in the center position because that's where I like angle mode to be. I'm gonna pull this in so that it covers only the center position and save. And now angle mode will become active only when the switch is in the center position. Now, if you have enabled the hide unused modes option, disable it because we're gonna add some more flight modes here. And the first one we're gonna add is flip over after crash mode, or turtle mode is what it's known. Flip over after crash mode is used when you have crashed and your quadcopter is upside down. It basically reverses the prop so you can flip it back over again and take off and fly back home. We're gonna find flip over after crash mode and hit add range. And then I'm gonna move that switch again, and once again, aux 2 will fill in there. Then I'm gonna put that switch in the downward position. I'm gonna look at where this yellow tick mark is, and I'm gonna drag this range over to cover the yellow tick mark. So what we've got now is that when that switch is in the middle position, it's in angle mode, and when it's in the down position, it's in turtle mode, or flip over after crash mode. Next up, we are going to add beeper mode, which means that I can push a button on my controller to make the beeper go beep, 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 and help me find the quadcopter if I've crashed it somewhere and lost it. I'm gonna just look for beeper mode, beeper mute, that's not it. There it is, beeper mode, add range. I'm gonna push this momentary switch on the upper right shoulder, and that's gonna fill in aux 3. For me, it did. For you, it may be a different channel. I'm gonna hold that switch in. That's the position where I want the beeper to go off. I'm gonna look at where this little yellow tick mark is, and I'm gonna drag over to cover that yellow tick mark and save. And now when I push that button, the beeper will go off. Well, not now because the quadcopter's not plugged in, and that is my basic setup. Arm, angle mode, beeper mode, and flip over after crash mode. Basically every quadcopter I have has this setup. Maybe in the future we'll set up something like GPS rescue, but I haven't got GPS rescue working right now, so we're gonna leave that alone. Now, if at any point that didn't go right for you, like you flipped a switch and nothing happened, then you may need to do more setup on your aux modes. You may need to actually set your controller up to map the switch to a specific aux mode. We're not gonna go into that in this video because I think it's gonna work for most people, but if you need that additional help, I've got a tutorial about how to do that. It's actually part of my beginner build series where I teach you how to build a whole quadcopter from start to finish. It's like 4+ hours of content, and at the end of it, you'll have built a whole quadcopter, set up the controller, bound the receiver, configured the flight controller, and you'll go out and you'll fly the dang thing. As part of that, I'm gonna link you to this how to set up aux modes tutorial. It may not be exactly like what you're working with because you have a different quadcopter, but I think it's gonna be what you need to get you over that hurdle. The next thing I'm gonna do is I'm gonna go to the presets tab, and I'm gonna load in my rates. Now I have a preset for my rates, Joshua Bardwell rates, and it's actually in the official Betaflight presets, so you can find it there. And I'm just gonna load the Joshua Bardwell rates and save and reboot. What are rates? If I go to PID tuning and rate profile settings, here is where the rates are configured. And rates define when I deflect the stick, you see I'm deflecting the stick here, how fast does the quadcopter rotate? And they significantly change the experience of flying the quadcopter. Slow rates give you a lot of precision, but you can't make snappy, sharp turns. Fast rates let you make snappy, sharp turns and really quick flip rolls and snap flips and rolls, but they're less precise, or they require more manual dexterity to make precise movements. The exact rates that are going to work best for you are going to be different for everybody. You're welcome to try my rates, but they may be a little bit too aggressive for some beginners who don't have a lot of experience flying fast quadcopters. I actually have a video about finding your perfect rates and it's got a procedure you can go through step by step to help you figure out what rates are going to work best for you. I'll put a link to that in the video description below, but frankly, I think many people would do best to just use a solid preset. And the preset I recommend, again, if we go to presets tab and rates, is the 533 racing rates. And you may be thinking, racing, isn't that for like fast pilots? But racers want a lot of precision. So these rates are actually relatively sedate and relatively controllable. And I think many beginners will do well to start out with them. Well, the only thing left to do now is take it outside and fly it. And yeah, I'm not going to make you watch this whole video and then just sign off without showing you a test flight. Of course, you're going to put a test flight. Before I do that though, can I remind you that I have a Patreon. Patreon is the single best way for you to say thank you for the content that you make, Bardwell. If you get value out of my content, if I helped you set up your quadcopter, if I helped you troubleshoot a problem, if I helped you learn something, or God forbid, I helped entertain you and made you chuckle, whatever value you get out of the content, think about how much that's worth to you. Head on over to the link in the video description, patreon.com, and sign up. It can be as little as $2 a month. $2 a month is the minimum. It's been the minimum for like 5 years, and with inflation and everything, I should probably raise it, but I don't. It's $2 a month, and that's just what it is. If you think you get that much value out of my content, it would mean so much to me if you'd sign up. It's really not that much money, and you might think it's inconsequential, but it really does add up. It really does add up, especially as more and more people do it. So that's my pitch. And if that was persuasive to you, the link's down below. And if that was not persuasive to you, that's cool. I don't care. We're just going to get on with our lives. I'll keep making videos. You'll keep watching them, and maybe someday you'll change your mind. Enjoy the fun.